2022 to order. Thank you everyone for being here with us this evening. We'll begin with a roll call, please.
Thank you, Mayor Henderson. Councilmember Pallavi?
Here.
Vice Mayor Romack?
Here.
Mayor Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Klevstad?
Here.
And Councilmember Zabriskie. I'll note him as absent this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much,
Thank
Sarah. And with that, we'll move into our next agenda item, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'm really excited that we have some folks from our town staff here this evening. So Carlos, one of our police officers, Nola, who's in our engineering department, and Sean, who is a senior accountant. I would love you to come up to the podium to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
Hey, everybody, please rise and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate you all being here this evening for that. Okay, we will move. Agenda item 4.0 is general public comment. This is an opportunity for anyone from the public to provide comment on any items that are not on our agenda this evening. Is there anyone here who would like to make a general public comment tonight? Okay, seeing none, we will close general public comment and we will move directly into our presentations. We have two presentations this evening. 5.1, we have some introductions, and then 5.2, our town manager report. So I will turn it over. Jen, are you leading introductions?
I am not, but Becky is over here and she will do our first introduction.
Perfect. Thank you, Becky.
Okay, great. Good evening, Council. I'm thrilled to be able to introduce our Nola Mitchell. Nola is right over there. She's our new associate engineer. She is originally from the Midwest, but has been out here for over 20 years. She actually lives in Tahoe City right now with her husband, Nick, and her two sons, Eli and Remy, who are ages 5 and 8. And her resume has... in her resume, she's had a variety of different jobs. She actually worked for Placer County at one point. She worked for the Bureau of Reclamation, and most recently she worked for CDM Smith, which is literally just right across the street from Town Hall. She's got a master's degree in civil engineering, and she's got a professional engineering certification as well. She loves to ski and hike and do anything outdoors. And I mean, one thing that I'll say about Nola is that during the interview process, one thing that stood out to me is that she really had a sincere interest in working for the community in which she lived, and had a lot of enthusiasm about the projects that we were working on. So we're super excited to welcome somebody like that to our team. So with that, I think I'll just say welcome, Nola, and thank you.
Wonderful. Becky, thank you so much. Nola, thank you for joining us. We're excited to have you on board. Acting Chief Renfro, I believe you're going to do our next introduction.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Today I'd like to happy to introduce our newest addition to the Truckee Police Department, Carlos Gomez Ortiz. Go ahead and stand up, Carlos. Carlos was born in Stockton, California, and at the age of 10 years old, he and his family moved here to Truckee. Carlos has attended all of the local Truckee schools, Truckee Elementary, Alder Creek Middle School, Truckee High School, and after graduating from high school, he attended Sierra College here in Truckee. He got his associate's degree in criminal justice, and after that, he was able to transfer, and he attended the University of California, Berkeley, where he graduated with a bachelor's degree in sociology. Despite being one of our younger officers, Carlos brought some prior experience to the department. While attending Sierra College, Carlos was a member of our VIP program, so he volunteered during his summer breaks with the Truckee Police Department. He was also, while attending Berkeley, he was also a community service officer and was working with the UC Police Department there. After he graduated college, he came back to Truckee and we hired him as a police officer trainee, and the town sponsored him through the Sacramento Police Academy. He graduated in December of this last year, and now he's currently in the field training program with the police department. Carlos enjoys anything any physical activity. He likes going to the gym, going on hikes, long bike rides. We welcome Carlos. Can't wait to see how his career develops here in Truckee, and we're excited to have him. Welcome, Carlos.
Welcome so much, Carlos. We're excited to have you. Thank you for all of the volunteering you've already done in our community, and go Bears. Okay, with that, 5.2, our town manager report this evening. Jen, I will flip over to you.
I think we have one more introduction. Regina.
I apologize. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm happy to introduce Sean Holmes tonight. He has joined us as our senior accountant and comes with a dual major from the University of Nevada, Reno in accounting and finance, and also currently has his active CPA license as a certified public accountant. He comes with governmental accounting experience in his awesome list of qualifications. Sean's hobbies include snowboarding and traveling, and he currently resides in Reno with his wife. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate you being here. And a round of applause for all of our new folks. We're excited to work with you all. All right. Now I think we can go to the town manager report.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I have a few things today. The first is to remind everybody that our scoping study for the EIR and the general plan process is underway. You're open to public comment through April 4th, and you can find more information on that on the town's website if you're interested in submitting comment. Also, you can join Vice Mayor Romack and Mayor Henderson next Tuesday, March 29th, for coffee talk. That'll be at Wild Cherries at 2:30 p.m. We have a number of community surveys out right now. The Community Collaborative is conducting a quick and confidential survey that will help local social service organizations develop programs to better address the health needs of our community. You can find that on the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation website. Also, Nevada County just released a survey for broadband. So if you're interested in providing feedback on that, you can find information on our social media sites and website that we've shared on behalf of Nevada County. And on less exciting news, taxes are due very soon. The Nevada County Treasurer and Tax Collector will be here March 31st through April 1st here at Town Hall in the conference room if you want to make in-payment tax payments in person. Sorry about that. And that is all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. That's wonderful. Any questions from council on any of the presentations this evening? No? Okay. Is there anyone here who would like to make a public comment on any of the presentations this evening? Okay, seeing none, we will close public comment. We will move on to our consent calendar. So our consent items for this evening include 6.1, our minutes from February 22nd and March 8th of 2022. 6.2, budget amendment for the Measure U election, June 2022. 6.3, amending the municipal code to allow town council to serve as the building appeal body. 6.4, 2022 CAL FIRE Business Workforce Grant Biomass Scoping Project. 6.5, authorization to execute master agreement related to State of California Local Partnership Program formulaic funding. And 6.6, State of California Low Carbon Transit Operations Program grant application. I believe we may have a desire to pull one of the consent items this evening. Is there anyone from council who would like to pull a consent item? Anyone from staff who would like to pull a consent item?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we'd like to pull 6.6, State of California Low Carbon Transit Operations Program grant application.
Thank you. And anyone from the public who would like to pull a consent item this evening? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar, including items 6.1 through 6.5?
So moved. I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we are unanimous in that. So we'll briefly return to 6.6, the State of California Low Carbon Transit Operations Program grant application. My understanding is that we just want to modify the language in that a little bit. Jen, would you like to give an update on that?
Sure, thank you. That's correct. A little bit of language modification. It was an older version that was incorporated in the agenda packet, and Alfred has, I just think, a couple slides to show what that modification is.
Thank you, Alfred.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of Town Council, Alfred Knotts. We'll just walk through some quick changes. There was a old version that was carried forward, and when Council Member Romack mentioned that there was a term in there, Squaw Valley, I knew that it was the old version, so I apologize for that. So it is just a clarification. These wholesale changes would not have been in there, but we were holding off on the March 8th agenda item because we were waiting for some revised estimates, and that was one of the changes that you'll note in there. There is a revised number that we're going to be requesting, so again, it was outdated report as to why. The clarifications that we're seeking and want to disclose tonight to council and to the public. We will be submitting for, assuming this is goes forward, we will be submitting for $116,000 and $241 as opposed to the $44,937 that's published. Another clarification is that this will be for next year's fiscal year operating. It's an application and funding for this year's funding that will be used for next year's operations. Again, the references to Squaw Valley have all been changed and should have been changed to Palisades Tahoe to reflect the correct place name. And there was a clarification, or there was an omission that wasn't in the published version that you did see that now will be in the final version, and that is the inclusion of specific census tracts that would potentially benefit from these funds, and that is a grant requirement. So that is in the actual resolution that would be signed, assuming that this is approved by council this evening. So those are the only changes. I apologize for the it went into our software and got spit back out as an old version. So I do apologize for that.
Quite all right. And thank you so much for the updates on some of the modifications and some of the language changes as well. Do any of my fellow council members have any questions about this consent item? No? Do any members of the public want to make a comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment on that. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll be happy to make the motion. I make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2022-10 as revised, approving the submittal of a low carbon transit operations program grant application for the fiscal year 21-22 LCTOP grant cycle.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And we are unanimous, so 6.6 passes as well. And I just wanted to say we have so many grant applications on consent this evening, so thank you so much. You all are doing so much work to go out and find additional funding sources for our community, and it's really impressive what you're bringing forward. Thank you for that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that was lightning fast. And now we get to turn to our one discussion item this evening, 7.1, which is our short-term rental ordinance amendments. And Hillary is going to kick us off with a presentation. So I'll turn it to you, Hillary.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. I think that may have set an all-time record for the quickest we've gotten through presentations and consent calendar, so great job. Our one discussion item this evening is the first reading of the short-term rental ordinance amendments. And as Council is aware, this is a topic that has come before Council multiple times over the past couple of years. I'll walk you through how we've got here, as well as the direction we previously received from council and how that has been incorporated into a proposed ordinance. First, I'd like to start with a bit of background on our existing short-term rental, or STR, ordinance, which was adopted in October 2020. At the time the ordinance was being developed, council made a conscious decision to approach the STR regulations in two phases. As a first phase, the 2022 ordinance adopted rules to help address nuisance issues and life safety, and established an annual registration requirement and a fee structure to support increased enforcement and accountability. At that time, council directed staff to monitor the new STR program for 1 year, then come back to council to consider whether additional changes are needed. To specifically whether there is a goal to proactively manage the number or use of short-term rentals. Since that time, the pandemic has only worsened Truckee's already significant housing shortage and housing crisis. This has resulted in significant impacts to our businesses and employers who are unable to fill positions due to the high cost of housing, as well as community impacts, including families forced to move away because they're unable to find stable housing in Truckee. As previously discussed with council, these impacts are felt across the income spectrum in our region. The town is aggressively working on addressing our housing challenges on multiple fronts by supporting the development of new income-restricted housing, implementing innovative programs like the Workforce Rental Grant Program, grants and loans to support the development of accessory dwelling units, and the below-market rate deed restriction program, which was addressed at the last council meeting. This fall, as we began the 1-year short-term rental review process, as previously directed by council, our council directed staff to work with stakeholders to consider if there are additional measures the town could take to manage the short-term rental program in a way that complements the town's other housing program efforts, with the goal of preserving and increasing the inventory of housing that's affordable to the workforce in Truckee. So this is just considered as one possible additional tool in our housing toolbox that we've been building over the past several years. So here's a snapshot of where we are in the STR program update process. Truckee adopted its first STR ordinance in 2020, and these new requirements went into effect on January 1st, 2021. So we're now just a bit past that 1-year mark. In September of 2021, your council adopted an urgency ordinance creating a 45-day moratorium on the issuance of new registration certificates. And on October 26th, your council extended that moratorium through June 15th, 2022, to allow time for the town to complete an STR study and consider updates to the ordinance. This fall, a stakeholder advisory committee worked with staff to complete a thorough study of STRs in Truckee and develop recommendations for council. The study has involved a multi-pronged process to better understand the landscape of short-term rentals in Truckee. The process involved gathering community input, including convening a stakeholder advisory committee, compiling and analyzing data on Truckee's existing STR inventory, considering the economic and housing impacts of short-term rentals, and learning from other jurisdictions about their approaches to short-term rentals. The advisory committee then developed recommendations, and we completed a community input survey with over 2,000 responses based off of those recommendations to gather further input. Then on February 8th, staff presented an overview of the study process and recommendations to your council, and council received public input and provided direction to staff on the changes you'd like to see in an ordinance amendment. Since that time, staff have taken council's direction and woven it into an amended ordinance, which we'll be considering tonight at the first reading. If there are no additional changes this evening to the ordinance, we anticipate bringing the second reading of the ordinance and ordinance adoption back to council on April 12th. Here's a brief recap of the council direction that was received on February 8th. Council directed staff to incorporate 3 management tools, which were all recommended by the advisory committee, into our short-term rental program. These include adoption of a townwide cap on the number of registration certificates, phasing out short-term rentals in accessory dwelling units and multifamily dwelling units, and implementing a 365-day waiting period after a transfer of ownership. Council also directed staff to increase penalties for violations and specify that the town may charge a fee for inspections and provide annual registration renewal deadline to help facilitate management of a wait list. And finally, council directed staff to develop a new workforce housing advancement program that will use a pool of short-term rental registration certificates as an incentive for workforce housing development. Next, I'll walk council through the draft ordinance amendments and how those have been incorporated, how we've incorporated council direction into the ordinance. In addition to the direction from council, there also are a few minor cleanup amendments that staff have proposed. The first change is a cleanup amendment to harmonize the transient occupancy chapter of our code with the short-term rental regulations in chapter 5.03. Currently, chapter 3.24 states that an operator must receive a registration certificate within 30 days of commencing advertising or operating a short-term rental. For consistency with the STR regulations, staff recommend changing this to a requirement to obtain a certificate prior to advertising or operating the STR. Now on to the short-term rental ordinance itself, chapter 5.03. The draft ordinance added additional language to clarify regulations regarding short-term rentals for accessory dwelling units, junior accessory dwelling units, or JADUs, and detached living areas. Specifically, state law prohibits short-term rentals in any ADU that received a building permit after January 1st, 2020. And the state also prohibits short-term rentals in all junior accessory dwelling units. Truckee Development Code also prohibits short-term rentals in detached living areas. This prohibition is now specifically called out in the STR ordinance. Finally, language has been added to specify that no new registration certificates will be issued for accessory dwelling units, regardless of the construction permit date. With regard to multifamily dwelling units, the proposed amendments prohibit new registration certificates for multifamily dwelling units, although existing certificate holders in good standing will be permitted to renew. For clarity, we've also added to the definition section a reference back to the multifamily dwelling unit definition within the Development Code. The registration certificate requirements section also adds 2 new exemptions. The first is for units in non-residential zones that provide 24-hour on-site management. Since the adoption of the 2020 ordinance, the town has treated these types of units, which are rather unusual, as hotels rather than STRs. So this is not a change to how they will be managed. Rather, we recommend cleanup language to clarify that these are not considered STRs under this chapter. Donner Lake Village is an example of this, as well as some of the fractional units at Old Greenwood that are not zoned residential. The second new exemption is for multifamily units that were originally approved as lodging units rather than dwelling units. Again, this is a very unusual circumstance. In fact, staff is only aware of one development that fits this exemption. These units are proposed to be exempt from the prohibition on new registration certificates in multifamily dwellings. However, as written, these units are subject to all other requirements of the short-term rental ordinance. So it's really just about that multifamily phase out. Tahoe Donner Lodge condos is the one development that staff is aware of that would meet this specific exemption. The next change proposed is a cap on the number of registration certificates, with a cap recommended at 1,255 certificates, which is the number that we had registered at the end of 2021. In anticipation of the registration cap and a likely wait list that will result from that cap, the amendments propose dividing the application process into 2 steps. The first step is an application for the wait list, at which point the application would be screened to confirm eligibility. The second step is the application for a registration certificate, once the applicant has reached the top of the wait list and a certificate has become available. At that point, the registrant would provide full details, including the occupancy cap or occupancy number, available parking, and contact information for the 24-hour on-call contact person. There are several additional details added to the ordinance to facilitate management of the cap. These include preferential processing of timely submitted renewal applications. This means that once you have a registration certificate and it remains in good standing, you'll have an opportunity to renew each year rather than joining the wait list. To facilitate this, the ordinance imposes a May 15th renewal deadline for all property registered in 2021 that has not yet renewed, and a December 31st deadline in subsequent years. This will allow us to have a cutoff date after which point available registration certificates would be issued to those who are on the wait list. The second change is to the renewal process, the application process rather, for new applicants. For those who are not registered in 2021. Applications for new registration certificates will open on June 13th, and applications will be processed in the order in which they're received. When the cap is reached, applications will be added to a wait list in the order in which they are received, and new registrations will then be processed as they become available in the wait list order. And finally, as specified under the current ordinance, registration certificates will expire upon change in ownership. The new owner will then be subject to a waiting period as well as any wait list that is in place at that time. To clarify regulations regarding change in ownership, staff are proposing one minor adjustment to the language that was published in the ordinance, and that is to subsection 5.02030E2D. The additional language, which is shown here in red, specifies that a change in ownership shall be defined by Revenue and Taxation Code. The purpose of referencing back to state law, to a state law definition, is to remove any uncertainty regarding what constitutes a change in ownership under our code. In addition to the cap, the ordinance also includes a 365-day waiting period after a change in ownership before the new owner may start the process of applying to join the wait list. The intent of this management tool is to influence investor behavior and discourage purchase of a property primarily for the purpose of investment to use as a short-term rental. This was a topic discussed in detail with the advisory committee as well as at the February 8th council meeting. I do want to point to some additional data that's become available since the February 8th council meeting. And that is a recent study published by real estate analytics firm RCLCO, which was just published their 2021 Second Home Consumer Research Survey. This provided some additional data indicating that the ability to short-term rent affects investor behavior in our region. When asked if they plan to generate rental income from their vacation home, 35% of respondents who identified the California mountain region responded definitely, and that rental income is a major justification for a second home purchase. An additional 35% indicated that they expect to generate rental income to some degree. Moving on to a different topic, as discussed at the February 8th council meeting, the town is in the process of developing a new workforce housing incentive program using short-term rental registration certificates as an incentive for new workforce housing units. I will not get into the details of this program tonight as it's still in development and will come back to council this summer. But for the purpose of this ordinance, I do want to address how this future program is contemplated in the ordinance as it relates to the registration certificate cap. Under the proposed, the proposal in the ordinance, council would have discretion of how to allocate permits that become available. So that would first be considered in May before we open applications for new applicants, and council would have discretion of the number of registration certificates to allocate to the regular registration certificates versus setting aside in the workforce housing advancement pool. In addition to that, council would have the discretion to add additional workforce housing advancement tokens above and beyond the number set in the cap, if council so chose in the future. Now moving on to the operating standards section, amendments will add a 30-day time limit for an operator to respond to a request to inspect a registered property, which provides some teeth in the town's ability to require inspections. It also specifies that the town may charge a fee for inspections. Additionally, to facilitate enforcement, maximum penalties for violations of the ordinance have been increased to $1,500 for the first violation, $3,000 for the second, and $5,000 for subsequent violations. And finally, the ordinance modifies the reasons for denial, suspension, or revocation of a registration certificate by specifying that a registration certificate may be denied due to applicant ineligibility, unit ineligibility, or because the overall cap has been reached. In terms of next steps, tonight we again are at the first reading of the ordinance. If there are no changes tonight, we anticipate bringing back the second reading April 12th at our next meeting. In April, council will also consider an update to the fee schedule. And then in May 15th will be the final deadline for renewal of registration certificates issued in 2021. After that date, we will know exactly how many we have available to allocate. And on May 24th, we anticipate having council consider that initial allocation of available registration certificates. Applications would then open for new registration and for the wait list on June 13th. This summer, we anticipate bringing the Workforce Housing Advancement Program guidelines to council. We'll begin quarterly assessments of the number of registration certificates we have available and providing that data in July. And then anticipate bringing a review back to council next spring. Thereafter, we would do reviews every other year as directed by council. So with that, the adoption of this ordinance is exempt from CEQA because the ordinance does not qualify as a project. Notably, the ordinance will not result in any construction or any other physical changes to the environment, and the ordinance does not change the land use designation or zoning for any site within the town's boundaries. Alternately, if this ordinance is considered a project, it's exempt from CEQA because it would qualify for both the common sense exemption and the Class 1 categorical exemption as described in the staff report. With that, staff's recommendations tonight are to introduce and waive the first reading of Ordinance 2022-02, amending Chapters 3.24 and 5.02 of Truckee Municipal Code, including the proposed change to Section 5.02030 E2D as described. And second recommendation is to find the adoption of this ordinance exempt from CEQA pursuant to CEQA guidelines sections 15060C2-3, 15061B3, 15301, and 15378.
Thank you, Hillary. That was a mouthful at the end. I really appreciate the presentation, and we're going to move to council questions momentarily, and then of course we'll open for public comment. Before we do that, I really want to thank everyone who's put all of their time and energy into this process. Our former and current town councils, our staff, our community. We've been working on our STR ordinance and ordinance updates for quite some time now. And I think it's truly been a learning process for all of us. It's not an easy issue, and I'm very grateful to everyone for the respectful dialogue that we've been able to have around it. What is in this ordinance tonight is the direction given by council to staff at our last STR discussion, so none of the key concepts in this ordinance are new this evening. I also want to briefly comment about what it has meant to listen to our community throughout this process. We've been listening through so many different means. Our community-wide outreach survey, where we had 1,500 people respond, hundreds of public comments that we've received before and at the various council meetings that we've had this topic come up on, in our coffee chats, in our stakeholder group, in numerous informal conversations with our constituents. And I think we recognize that not everyone will necessarily be satisfied this evening with whatever the outcome ends up being. That does not mean we're not listening. We engage in the Truckee way. That's really important. It's our touchstone. It's what we come back to. That means respectful dialogue, listening to diverse perspectives, honoring that not everyone will necessarily agree, and that's okay. In a way, that can be good. It shows that diverse viewpoints are being elevated and represented when it comes to STR regulation. Not agreeing doesn't mean we're not listening. I think my fellow council members, I think I can say this up here, and our staff have put in countless hours to ensure that we have been and continue to listen throughout this process. So with that, we will move to council questions, and then we'll open for public comment. Councilmember Pallavi, do you have any outstanding questions?
I just have a quick question actually on the timeline, not necessarily on the ordinance. And more, just a clarification, I think you showed there, I don't know if you want to pull that slide back up, Hillary. We're going to close renewals on May 15th, but we're not going to open wait list until June 13th. And in between there, we're going to decide on something. Can you clarify what exactly that decision point is going to be? Very simply, other than, I guess it might be reservation of some of the housing tokens or something like that, but maybe just clarify that for the public of what's going to happen in between those dates.
Sure. The decision there is really taking the number of available registration certificates, because we had 1255 as of December 31st. There are a handful that have not renewed for 2022, so we're giving a final deadline of when folks need to renew, and then take whatever is remaining and bring back to council a discussion on if we would like to set aside some number of those for the Workforce Housing Advancement Program, and then how many we want to direct towards the general pool, which would be towards new applications.
Great, thank you. And I won't make a comment on that. I'll let that be for now. And then I think maybe just a quick clarification also, mostly for the public, but the fee is the fee, whatever that fee ends up being when it comes back to us for adoption in April, but there won't be any prorated fees or anything like that, no matter when you actually go to register for this program. It will be one fee, and that fee will be consistent whether that's on January 1st or on December 20th, correct?
That's correct. The fee and the registration itself is on a calendar year basis. So if you register January 1st, you have 365 days to take advantage of that permit. If you register November 1st, you have a shorter period of time, but the renewal still comes up on December 31st, and that fee is not prorated.
Great, thank you.
Vice Mayor Romack, any outstanding questions?
Yeah, actually, just running through this timeline, the proposed wait list, or the proposed waiting period would be 365 days after you've purchased a property. If somebody has purchased a home in the last year, so say they purchased it June 14th, 2021 till now, would they be eligible to get on the wait list immediately, or do they have to wait that 365-day period?
As drafted, you would have to wait 365 days after a home is purchased before you can get on the wait list. So that includes this initial step of opening up the wait list, as well as subsequent applicants who may wish to join the wait list.
But it wouldn't be 365 days from the date of adoption of the ordinance. It would be 365 from the date that someone purchased the property before the ordinance took effect. So if somebody bought property 6 months ago, they'd be waiting another 6 months.
Got it. Thank you for that clarification. Also, I know there were some comments, we're proposing to increase the fines up to $1,500 for the first fine. Can you just walk through again how the process works if somebody calls the hotline and reports that there's a violation? It's not an immediate, you are getting a $1,500 fine if someone calls the hotline. Can you just explain kind of how that works a little bit?
Sure, and I'm looking at Nikki if you would like to take that one, or I can.
So when we get a call on the hotline, we send somebody out to investigate. First step is we get a call on the hotline, and the operator of the property is notified. They're given 35 minutes to acknowledge that they've received the contact that there is a problem at their short-term rental, and then we give them an hour to correct the issue. So that's calling the short-term renters and saying, hey, you're partying, or you have a fire in the backyard, or whatever it is. It gives them an hour to correct the issue. If at the end of the hour, so then the person who reported the problem gets a call back, and the host compliance says, was the issue resolved or not? If they don't respond, or if they say the issue was not corrected, then we send out one of our compliance officers to check out the issue, tell the people to quiet down, or take corrective action. If we go out there and we find that there is still something that's not right, at that point we would potentially explore a fine. They understand that there is a human element of this, and they work really hard to make sure that there's an education piece before they're actually immediately working to fine any of our operators. So it's definitely not like we're going to hit you with the $3,000 fine the first piece of litter we find on your driveway. It's definitely a very human process where there's a lot of opportunity to correct the issue before we even get out there.
I would just add in follow up on that, even subsequent to coming out there, as Nikki pointed out, there's a lot of education that goes into response to these, and it's focused heavily on that side before issuing large fines.
Thank you. And then last question, and I think, maybe we could discuss this a little bit if people are interested, but I think it would be good to know some information for tracking, moving forward when we do the biannual review. So at what point would you want to know what we'd be interested in? Because I could see when somebody applies for a permit, if they're ineligible, that would be a good opportunity to get some information from them. So should we share that with you tonight, I'm guessing, or that's not necessarily part of the ordinance? We can wait on that one.
It's not part of the direction needed tonight, but to the extent that you have ideas, we welcome to hear that feedback. And of course, you'll have a couple of years and even another opportunity in May where something may come up that you want to add to that list.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Klofstad.
Thank you. Well, staff, you did a great job actually implementing most of the answers to my questions ahead of time into the presentation, so thank you for that. I really appreciate tying the transfer of ownership to the California State Code. That makes a lot of sense, and I think we'll simplify that for a lot of reasons. And the only other thing I would like to just daylight to the public is, because I've had a couple people ask me this, the Donner Lake, the Tahoe Donner Lodge condos, that was approved prior to the town incorporating, and we're really clear that there's no opportunity for a new development to come in with those same 14-day max days and kind of duplicate that, correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's a pretty unique situation that they are under, which was approved prior to town incorporation. It is not tied to a HOA's CCNRs. It's tied specifically to that initial development approval.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And then the only other thing, thank you for the comment back on you don't provide tax advice with the 1031 exchange. This does seem like another potential kind of, I'm just looking for ways that people are going to try to go around this potential ordinance. But it seems like there is an opportunity there if needed, or, if somebody could pursue a 1031 exchange from another property, correct?
Yeah, well, we're really not going to provide any tax advice to anybody. And 1031 exchanges are not the province of the town. We don't review them. We don't know anything about them. We're not directly regulating them. It's simply not our thing.
Not our thing. So we're going to leave the ordinance the way it is, and if somebody interprets it their circumstance to abide by that, that is their prerogative.
Absolutely. I think I would just add that we all know as we do these programs, the Workforce Housing Grant Program, we have to be flexible and adjust. And as issues come up, I suspect we'll come up with some things in the next 2 years that we want to address either at the biannual the 2-year review or even bring back before that. I mean, that happens pretty consistently when we get into some of the nuances of these unique circumstances, whether it's the lodge at Tahoe Donner or trusts and estates. I think we just have to be prepared for that.
Thank you. And the only other thing, kind of back to what Councilmember Pallavi brought up, we are not, and I just want to be clear, we're not deliberating tonight on what we do with those extra certificates. That will be in May. Whether or not those all get turned over to waitlist people or we set some aside for this future program or a combination thereof.
That's correct. And part of the thinking behind that is we don't yet know exactly how many we will have because we need that firm deadline for renewal before we have a number to allocate.
And but at last count, it was 103. Is that correct?
Correct. At last count, we had 103 available, or the difference between the current number of registrations and the 1255 cap. We anticipate that there may be some additional that renew by May, but we really just don't know how many.
Right. Okay.
This is set up so that it creates the authority for the council to make that allocation if you choose to, without having to come back and amend the ordinance. So if you decide to do that in the future, you can do it very quickly with a resolution, rather than having to do 2 readings plus 30 days.
Very convenient. Thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will move to open public comment. I know we have a few members of the public here. If anyone would like to make a public comment on this agenda item, you can go ahead, step up to the podium. You have 3 minutes. My parents always told me not to interrupt, but if you get past 3 minutes, I'll interrupt you just to make sure everyone gets a chance at the podium. Just go ahead, you can join us right up here at the podium. Yep, right up there. And then you'll see a timer over on this side of the dais for 3 minutes, and they'll start that once you start speaking. And just state your name for all of us as well, please.
Sorry to Crystal, yeah, thank you.
Okay, my name's Crystal Baker. I work for a local property management company. I basically wrote like a letter, and this is mainly to the cap. This is what this is going to affect us. So I work for a local property management company that was established in 1973. When I first started working with them almost 5 years ago, they had approximately 100 short-term rentals on their program. Over the next couple of years, that number went down to about 70 because of companies like Vacasa. Owners were getting offered an extremely low percentage management fee to switch to them, and we just could not compete. Then COVID happened, and instantly rentals were shut down with the travel ban. Once the ban was lifted, many protocols were put into place to be able to rent. Many of our rentals are old family cabins that have accumulated many things over the years, so for owners to clear out the clutter to be able to sanitize every item properly was just not feasible. So we lost many more of our rentals, and then we lost some that decided to renovate while all the craziness was going on. Then after all of that, the short-term rental permit requirements came into play. We now have 25 properties with active permits. That is 1/3 of what we had prior to COVID and just 1/4 of what we had in 2018. All through COVID, we were told to hang in there, that we will all get through this together. Well, we did, barely. Now the houses that decided to renovate are done and want to come back on our program, but we are not able to get them a short-term rental permit. We need to get some of these houses back renting or we will not make it. If you implement the registration certificate cap, we will have no chance. My boss has spent 40 years building their business and has followed every rule and regulation only for the town to be shutting us down. Not allowing these homeowners to rent is not going to get more long-term rentals. Their families have been using their cabins/houses for generations and will continue to do so. Any homes that were willing to long-term rent switched to do that when COVID came into play. It might make them rent for a month or two at a time, but that is not going to help the workforce housing shortage. The real reason there's a shortage is because when COVID showed up, a lot of people then were able to work remotely. Being able to work remotely caused many people to move to the area and rents to skyrocket. Maybe there should be an incentive to rent to a working local instead of someone that works remotely. The problem there is that people working remotely can afford a much higher rent and locals just can't compete with them. Maybe instead of the cap, you should implement a requirement that owners or property managers have to speak to every single renter that books a cabin or house. We have found success in this one simple rule. Speaking to our actual customers lets us know they are genuine, real people and lets us get a better feel for what they are renting the house for. Also, we are within 10 minutes of any of our rentals, so complaints or issues we're able to address immediately. So basically, that's it.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good evening. I'm Laura Lindgren. I'm a longtime Truckee homeowner and resident. I submitted written comments supporting this STR ordinance, which I believe is soundly based on data, experience, and a study of what has worked in other towns, as well as extensive community input, both during the process and at the last council meeting. I'm not going to repeat any of those comments here, but want to make a couple of brief overall points. First, if Truckee cannot resolve the need for housing for full-time residents, workers, and families, we will no longer have a livable, attractive, or sustainable community. We cannot thrive where shops and businesses cannot find workers, or without teachers, medical workers, and other professional and skilled workers needed to support a community. When these valued residents and workers cannot find housing, they go elsewhere. The proposed STR ordinance is one needed and necessary piece to addressing this crisis. Second, the proposed ordinance is balanced, sensible, and a fair approach. A significant portion of the housing stock, over 9%, remains available to support sustainable tourism, while ensuring that another significant proportion is potentially available for needed workers and full-time residents. And it is going to be implemented in a way that causes minimal disruption. Anyone who isn't currently STRing can continue to do so indefinitely. Those who choose to sell will still enjoy significant gains, particularly given the recent and substantial rise in housing prices. Finally, in reviewing the comments to the proposal, it seems that there are many owners who do not oppose the concept, but request exemptions or exceptions from various provisions, such as the cap, the wait list, or want the ability to pass on STR rights. These requests, if entertained, would eventually eviscerate the cap and other provisions and defeat the purpose of the ordinance by rendering it ineffective. I believe it is in the best overall interest of our community to approve the ordinance as drafted. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. My name is Jennifer Jennings. I've appeared over the years before this board and prior boards about short-term rentals, and I really appreciate that this is finally coming to a conclusion, and I think it's a good conclusion. It's not everything I would have wanted. I live in an area where it's densely populated with short-term rentals, so I would have liked a neighborhood density cap, but maybe that will be coming in the future. But I also want to say that I did call the hotline during the winter storm when the short-term renters across the street decided to park in other people's driveways so theirs could be plowed, and it was quite a mess. So, but I really appreciate how well it was handled and that it was handled quickly, and I think it's a good system. Frankly, quite a bit better and more responsive than what we have here at Tahoe Donut where I live. So I do appreciate all the progress that the town has made under your leadership, and I urge you to adopt this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have anyone else who would like to make a public comment on this agenda item?
Good evening, council members. I don't have a public comment, but may I ask just one question to clarify something? Is that possible?
What's your question?
So for the New Year's 2023 renewal permits, you mentioned that the cap of 1,255 is the total number of the current permits, the existing ones. Does that mean that all the holders of those permits will not have problems with renewing it for the 2023? That's the question. Thank you.
That's a great question, and I'll let Hillary respond because I think I can, but I'll just let you from the staff perspective to make sure we're all aligned.
Sure. Existing permit holders who are still in good standing, meaning they haven't had their permit suspended, are able to renew without joining the wait list. And then any remaining permits, so anyone who doesn't renew or if a home has sold, those permits will then be issued to anybody on the wait list.
Got it. Thank you so much.
And tell us your name.
Yeah, my name is Gaisar.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you.
About it. Have a good one. Thanks.
And anyone else who would like to make a public comment on this agenda item this evening? Okay, seeing no one else, we will close public comment and we will move into council deliberation. Councilmember, thank you, Councilmember Pallavi. Thank you. I'll turn back to you if that's okay.
Yes, deliberation. So, yeah, we've been doing this for a long time. I think everybody's put in a ton of effort on this. I will be the messenger once again. Nobody up here, I'm not speaking necessarily for every member of the community, but I just want to be really clear that nobody's vilifying tourism, nobody's vilifying short-term renters, nobody's vilifying somebody who chooses to do whatever they choose to do with their property. What we're simply doing is using some of the very few levers of local government and regulation to try to, create balance in our community, try to create balance both in our housing stock, in our community character, in our tourism industry, and all of those things. So I just want to be really clear about that. We are exactly, as Ms. Lundgren said, we're not revoking anybody's permits or providing any kind of taking in that respect. So, just really want to confirm that we do believe that tourism is a vital sector of the economy and that people are able to do what they need to do with their properties. And we also have to make sure that as a community, we are providing balanced regulations in order to provide the most success for both resiliency, our workforce, people of all different needs and abilities in our community. With that said, I am in support of what has come before us tonight. I know that we hashed out a lot of these issues before, so I'm hoping that we have a unanimous consent to what's before us tonight, and just really believe that this, as our town manager mentioned, this is a process. This is not the end of said process. In fact, we already saw like 10 more meetings that we're going to have to talk about other aspects of this process. So, it's going to keep going. We're going to revise it. We know that some things aren't going to be perfect right off the bat, and we're going to do our best to continue the balance that I think we've come to tonight, and to course correct as necessary and deal with issues that arise in the future. So I think it's an exciting time, and I'm happy to support what's before us. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Pallavi. Vice Mayor Romack, your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah. Councilmember Pallavi, a lot of great sentiment that I share. Creating balance is imperative. I really appreciate town staff's work, Mayor, Councilmember Pallavi, and all the other members of the working group. A lot of effort has gone into this. Thanks to all the community members who took the surveys, who sent us public comments, who have reached out to all of us individually at the grocery store, walking on the trails, everywhere else. It's great to have a community that does care, and we're not going to make everyone happy, but we are going to try our best, again, to create balance. And as Councilmember Pallavi said, this isn't perfect. There are definitely some things that I would hope we can track. At the last meeting where we discussed this, there are a few things in this ordinance that, I will support tonight moving forward, but things like the phasing out of multifamily, I do still feel like there is a bit of an equity issue when we are targeting a specific type of property. So I would like to, keep track of multifamily units that sell, or people who try to get a permit, what happens to them, just so we kind of have an understanding. And, I know it's all incumbent on us to pay attention to Zillow and talk to our realtor friends to see if it is having an impact on the sale price of multifamily and if it's helping getting locals into that. So that would just be something I'd like to make sure we pay attention to. The other aspect of the ordinance that we discussed that I was hoping would come forward is the primary residence exemption. And again, just to allow our local workforce to be able to, short-term rent their property, and not so they can afford it, that they couldn't otherwise afford it, but to give them the ability to do that. So again, just track how many permanent residents maybe are on the wait list. I don't know if that's something that can be in, where you have to put in if you're a permanent resident or something like that, just so we can kind of get an idea of how that is affecting our local workforce. But yeah, with that, I think we all did a lot of great work discussing it and going through a lot of the issues, so I will support this ordinance as written this evening.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Romack. Councilmember Klostad, over to you.
I completely agree and echo both of your sentiments. This is not an attack on anyone or any sector of our community. We're really, truly just trying to do the best we can to keep our community. And those were the exact two issues that that you and I were not in complete alignment on with the rest of our council. But knowing the importance of moving this ordinance forward and recognizing that we have opportunities in the future to further evaluate and improve it, those are the two areas I also want to monitor and tag for evaluation. And other than that, very supportive of moving this forward and actually getting it into action.
Thank you, Councilmember Klostad. I'll just say that I think regulating STRs has potential benefits. It also could have potential drawbacks, and we don't know the full magnitude of those yet. Some jurisdictions have much more stringent STR regulations adopted. Others are much more lenient, and I think that's really why we went through the very robust community engagement and data gathering process that we did to inform where this ordinance has ended up tonight. I just want to reiterate, it's going to be critical that we come back as part of the biannual STR process, and really the first time will be summer 2023, so it's actually not even in 2 years for our first review, which I think is important because we've seen with some of our other programs, like our long-term rental grant program, we needed to pivot some of that. We needed to open that up. I absolutely appreciate and understand some of the discomfort around multifamily properties and the phase out of those. I think I would just say to that, multifamily units are inherently more affordable. We want to remove as many barriers to achieving those units for workforce housing or long-term rentals as we can. And so I do think it is a fair and just thing to try to open up opportunities for those properties. So we are targeting them for the phase out, and I think the reason for that is a very good reason. I think it also means that, we still need to be looking at other innovative ways to really move the needle on housing in our community, and like our BMR program, other housing opportunities. The reality is that we are land constrained in terms of what we can build, and so we have to do what we can related to our existing building stock. We're sort of working on incremental progress and working at the margins with this. So with that, I also support the direction of this ordinance. So I think I am hearing that we are probably unanimous in support. Are there any other, before I ask for a motion, are there any other, we've talked a little bit about metrics. Councilmember Klostad, Vice Mayor Romack, you had some metrics that you would like to see for when it comes back in summer 2023. Are there any other metrics that you would like to just let staff know about this evening? Of course, we'll have other opportunities in the future.
I think Vice Mayor Romack actually identified some important ones, and I'm fine with just those at this point. We want to keep it as simple as possible, as complex as this is, not make it any worse.
Sounds wonderful. Councilmember Pallavi, would you like to make a motion on this? I know it's near and dear to your heart.
Only because I've been working on it for 4 years. I remember Jennifer Jennings, I think you came to one of our first council meetings and brought this up when Councilmember Klövstad and I first were seated. So I would like to introduce and waive the first reading of Ordinance 2022-02, along with all of the additional chapters, including the proposed change to section 5.02.030E2D, and find the adoption of the ordinance exempt from CEQA. Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And we are unanimous, and that's a lot of work. That's months and months and years of work. So thank you so much to everyone for your continued engagement in this, and this will not be the last of it either. Okay, that was our only discussion item this evening. So we are going to move directly into 8.0, our council reports. Councilmember Klövstad, would you like to start this evening?
Certainly. Well, I spent a lovely weekend with Hillary Hodds and Mayor Henderson at the Civic Well Conference. This was truly a wealth of knowledge and inspiration, and I look forward to sharing more about these, more about what we learned as these topics come before council, because pretty much so everything we talked about there is something that we're working on here. And that was very exciting for all of us. I think we got pretty energized by it. I had the pleasure of attending the heat pump seminar. It was put on by Flowtech today. I know. It was so cool, you guys. I'm not kidding you. These units are amazing. They're actually 3-in-1. They will heat your house, cool your house, and give you your domestic hot water. Some of them can be as much as 400% efficient, and down to 150% efficient in comparison to a regular gas furnace. These are just amazing. So I'm really excited about working with our community and our and the Contractors Association in trying to implement more of these in our region. They really are transformative in terms of our carbon footprint of our buildings. Also attended the Tahoe Basin biomass discussion last week, and we created a fact sheet and refined the consulting scope of work that the town is going to be contributing. I think it's $2,000 towards, which will help help further that potential project and grant application. The Climate Transformation Alliance also met last week and finalized their charter and made some significant progress on the strategic plan. So we should be daylighting our branded charter document soon, all cool with our logo and everything. There were continuing discussions on the Southwest Gas franchise agreement and developing a response to their recent correspondence. And then continue to work on elevating the forest fire exhibit. There will be a climate dispatch in the CRSN in April, aligning with our sustainability focus for April, highlighting this exhibit. And then I also did want to just invite the rest of council to join me on a tour, personalized tour of it by the co-creators. We have one scheduled for April 5th at 5 p.m. And they are willing to come up and do one just specific to council if anybody is interested and would prefer a different date. So invite you to that. It's spectacular.
That is wonderful. Thank you so much. And I don't know how you fit in all of those other things with the 4-day conference, so that's impressive. Councilmember Pallavi.
I did actually I've had a couple chances to go through the forest fire exhibit, and it really is just really cool. And every time I'm at the rec center, I try to read a different part of it because I'm never there for the full time to actually get through it. But it's really well done and really, really interesting too. So I appreciate that. And I would like to take you up on that. I won't be available on the 5th, so maybe we'll work on something. Otherwise,
set aside another time.
Yes, precisely. Yeah, totally. I attended the general plan EIR scoping meeting, which was fairly uneventful, actually, although quite informative. So that was good. We had a visit Truckee Tahoe board meeting where we spent some time, and just to give the rest of the council heads up, just a little bit of time sort of discussing how additional transit occupancy tax collections get brought back into the budget. So just something to consider that as Visit Truckee Tahoe leans in and really works towards more of a stewardship model, or at least partial stewardship model, how some of those funds from tourism can also come back in to augment some stewardship activities. So more just planting seeds and having a discussion around that board with how all of that might go. And other than that, I think that's all. And I had lunch with our former housing program manager, Shauna Doherty, to catch up and figure out what's next. So other than that, that's been my couple of weeks. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Romack.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with Aaron Nussain with BAE. We discussed, he was part of the working group for short-term rentals, so had some good conversations around that, as well as the below market rate program that we had discussed. So just getting some more insight from him as a economist and a local. And lots of other conversations on STRs. Also, I've been having some meetings recently, and in fact, Mayor and I received an email, I believe today, on childcare challenges in Truckee. So that's just a topic that we might be hearing more about, and I know Washoe County has started a program, so going to be doing more research into that just to see what's out there. And then join Mayor and I next Tuesday. I know Jen mentioned this already. We're having a coffee at 2:30 on Tuesday. And then finally, Follies practice. The Truckee Follies returns. Councilmember Paula V and I were practicing right before this meeting. Tickets go on sale for that April 1st. So very excited for that to come back after a short hiatus.
Thank you. Well, I think you all have already covered the things I've done. I also attended the 4-day Yosemite Policymakers Conference. It was just tremendous. 120 elected officials, some of our state senators, assembly members, and then many council members, mayors. We talked about energy, resiliency, biomass, climate, housing, diversity, inclusivity, and so much more. And I think those of us who attended, we're going to do a debriefing session to really ensure we're bringing all of that knowledge and information to benefit our community right here. I also had many STR discussions. I met with some of our committee members, again, just to kind of continue going through the data. I met with Aaron Nussain, with Jim Winterberger, and then a lot of different constituents, just sort of informal conversations as we were coming into this evening. And I was going to say the coffee chat next week. Come to our coffee chat next week at Wild Cherries. It really is an opportunity to talk about anything at all that you want to talk about with Vice Mayor Romack and I. So come with questions. We won't have all the answers, but we'll look forward to some collaborative problem solving. And that's it. So with that, we have covered everything, and I will call us to a close until our next regularly scheduled Truckee Town Council meeting. Thank you.